Hey, all you people out there in wonderful South Africa land. I hope that you're all surviving the load shedding. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, joined today by Sara. Sara, how are you doing?
I'm fine for surviving the load shedding. Yep.
Chris Hutton, are you surviving the load shedding?
Hi Nick, yeah, I think somehow, slowly but surely. I apologize for my lack of lighting, so you can't see the different hues in my beard, but at least the UPS for the Wi-Fi is working, so small blessings.
Don't worry, lighting has been particularly bad this past while. Thanks to our friends at Eskom and Lutuli House. But anyway, before we get properly into the stuff, I am worried by the ominous signs of end times. Firstly, there appears to be a tiger roving around South Hattingh, which has not yet been captured, despite a lot of people searching for it. I think it's mauled some dogs, and it tried to attack a person who managed to get away. And now, somewhat worryingly, a seal has attacked someone in Cape Town, which is not a thing seals usually do. So it's a little bit worrying. But anyway,
I think it's
into the serious news. Clearly, something is going on. Let's get into the proper news, and that is that the Gauteng metros are complaining that due to load shedding, they are not able to properly pump water, particularly to high-lying areas anymore. And as a result, they are staring down the barrel of major shortages across the metros. The city of Joburg and Tshwane said, according to reporting, I think, by Eyewitness News, that their water towers are taking strain due to prolonged power cuts, while scorching temperatures have caused increased demand for water, and that their reservoirs are simply not filling up fast enough because they're without power a lot of the time. A City of Tshwane spokesperson said that in order to maintain a steady water supply, residents must adhere to level 1 restrictions and reduce consumption. Continuous load shedding is affecting us and is going to affect our ability to ensure that water is available, particularly in high-lying areas. Well, at the same time, Eskom, there was a very interesting thing that happened yesterday, which is that there was a sort of ominous moment where Eskom, I think, cancelled a media briefing due to an emergency meeting. And I thought, oh, here we go. Here's stage 8. And then we went to stage 4, which is interesting. So they must have managed to turn something on. But the larger problem remains, and one of the ameliorating things that Eskom has been doing to try and reduce load shedding is they run their open cycle gas turbine diesel power generators, which I believe when they're running at full kilt can take us down by 2 stages of load shedding, because they add something like 2,000 megawatts to the national grid. But they ran out of money allocated for them in the financial year we're currently in, which is one of the reasons why we've got such bad load shedding right now. Now, apparently, there was a decision made to roll over some debt for Eskom and to basically free up some funds, which would allow them to buy more diesel. I think 50 million litres was the amount that they were looking at. But Treasury is doing its best to fight back against this. It says we can't just keep giving money to Eskom because it is a dark, dark hole, if you'll excuse the pun. Chris, we're in a terrifying position here because, we're seeing things like the water running out, right? Which is like really serious stuff. And at the same time, the economy is faltering. But can you keep paying for this diesel? If you don't fix the problems, it's like filling a bucket that has a massive leak in it, and the leak is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Is Treasury making the right call by trying to prevent money being spent on diesel? What do you make of this?
I do want to give Treasury some credit for a modicum of fiscal responsibility. It would also be good if they really...
it's so unusual in government, isn't it?
It would be quite something if they went after government departments for frivolous spending, for massive pay increases for civil servants who don't perform, all that stuff. I mean, I would want that from Treasury as well. But I have to give them some credit for this at least. You can continue spending, as you say, and pouring money into a bucket that just keeps on leaking. It won't solve any of the fundamental problems. So I don't think we should expect these calls for increased budgets for Eskom to go away anytime soon, because always keep in mind now, I think in every show pretty much that we do this year leading up to next year, it's all in the context of the next general elections and hopefully in April next year. Now that we're on stage 4, I think it's a useful narrative because President Ramaphosa cancelled his trip to Davos and he stayed. And look, we're from stage 6 to stage 4. He is serious. He's tackling these problems. He's having meetings. It serves the ANC narrative, I think. But keep in mind, doesn't mean actual solutions are being implemented. From what I've read this morning, the ANC Parliamentary Caucus also summoned the leadership of Eskom to a meeting on Monday evening and demanded answers on why things aren't being solved. And Minister Pravin Gordhan was also in that meeting, apparently, because the ANC feels Eskom is undermining them and sabotaging them before the elections. I think they don't give enough credit and ideas for undermining them.
Let's just dwell on this for a little bit. You're correct in saying the ANC, and it's specifically Pravin Gordhan, right, has accused Eskom, and this is in line with what Gwede Mantashe said, of deliberately trying to sabotage the party ahead of the 2024 elections, right?
Not Minister Gordhan, so the ANC caucus. Gordhan was part of the meeting, so I'm not sure on which side he was, But to just sum up, I don't foresee finding billions and billions solving anything anytime soon. And that being said, don't expect if money is found for renewable energy, for example, or coal or nuclear, that the problems will be solved, because the ANC ideology demands that they decide who gets which contract, which suppliers to use, who to import components from, all that sort of stuff. So for as long as we've got this system in place of Eskom being the monopoly supplier of electricity, you're going to continue seeing massive wastage to the tune of billions of rands.
Another interesting, so sorry, I want your thoughts on what Chris was saying there, but also another interesting thing I noticed here about some of the reporting. So in News 24's piece about the diesel shortage and Treasury battling with Eskom, it says here, it's quoting its sources saying, in meetings with political parties, organized labor and business on Monday, chaired by President Cyril Ramaphosa, the key message from the Eskom board and management was that load shedding was here to stay for the next 2 years at a minimum. At the very same time, Enoch Godongwana, who is currently in Davos rather than President Ramaphosa, has said that, this load shedding thing, we're really working on it now. And eventually in the next 12 to 18 months, we will be able to say that load shedding is, quote, a thing of the past. That is the target, Godongwana said when he asked by a journalist on the sort of sidelines of the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos. This is a line that seems to be coming out of not just Gwede Mantashe, but Godongwana as well. Now, that the problem will be fixed in about a year's time. And as long as we pay attention to it, because we've got all this unused capacity, and all we need to do is just fix it, and then everything will be fine again. Sara, what do you make of that?
I was going to say they're lying, but I think what it really is as part of the electoral strategy, Mantashe and Godongwana. In other words, you look at the timeline, a year to 18 months. In other words, guys, in time for voting for us, this will be solved. It won't be solved. It can't be solved. It's way too big to be solved. These guys don't know how to solve it. They're sort of increasingly putting whatever interaction they have, it's the Eskom board versus this ministry, that ministry, the next ministry. So in other words, they're trying to separating their own beast from their responsibility and say, they're not doing their job, etc. Or they're trying now, I think, to hang Pravin Gordhan out to dry, because I think they now see him as dispensable. If there's any group of people whose promises of the end of load shedding being less than 2 years away, I would not trust, it is an ANC minister. It's like A plus B equals C, and you get it just, if you look at, for example, if Gordhan has been slow in progressing what he's been instructed to progress, and he hasn't done his work, and Gwede's was annoyed because he wanted more coal, or the board wasn't doing that or that. There's no fluidity. There's no sense of someone's in charge. Someone is really making serious decisions. Someone really knows what's going on, how to fix it.
But you mentioned about the uncoupling.
Sorry?
The uncoupling. You mentioned before the show about the decision to uncouple Eskom.
Well, somebody, the article I wrote was talking about that was Gordhan's function. He was instructed after Ramaphosa was persuaded to uncouple the transmission side, send it into the private sphere. And Gordhan, being the good communist that he is, didn't. I'm sure it's a case of didn't say he wouldn't, just didn't do it. The other suggestion was, of course, to put it in Eskom into business rescue. which I think would be quite a lot of fun, because the paupers will dance when somebody gets in there. But they talk. What worries me is that the thing about you can't, they're not going to give them more. They're not just going to put diesel into a black hole. If we could get to load stage 2 on a consistent basis, most business people can make a plan. But once you're going from the 1 to the 2 to the 1 to the 3 to the 4 to the 5 to the 6 and the 5 and that becomes the problem. Is the inconsistency, the frequency, the length of time. That's the big problem. So the economy, I mean, I generally agree with Chris, but the economy needs all the help it can get. And if that's all the help it can get for the next 2 years, here's a question. Hasn't the government got diesel stored away somewhere that it should just be sending up to Eskom?
Well, I believe that there was corruption involving our diesel storage. I think some of it was either misstored or burned or stolen. I can't remember the details. I know it's the surprise of no one. I think that point about Gordon's refusal or sort of failure to unbundle Eskom is really interesting because, as Terence Corrigan asked on the show yesterday, is there even a plan? And I think that this may be coming to a deeper problem, which is, regardless of whether there is a plan or not, regardless of whether the plan is good or not to fix the problem, is there actually any capability to enact said plan? Because apparently it doesn't matter if the president says do it, it just doesn't happen.
Now, I would have thought that, sorry, just to say that, I would have thought that your president is in charge, your minister of Watson doesn't do what he's told, you say to him, do it by next Wednesday or you're out. I mean, that's really how the real world should operate. But I mean, I think one day all of these people will end up, look back in history as they were so wedded to an obsolete ideology that they were prepared to let the country go to pot.
I'll tell you what else I think will be interesting is one day, of course, the ANC will be gone. And when it is gone, people will write books about this time in South Africa's history. And I am very interested to see what details emerge at that time about what precisely was going on at Eskom during this period. I think it will be very, very interesting to know. Konongwana did say some things that I think were correct in that interview, by the way, where he said that the problem will be fixed in 18 months, where he was asked whether more money could be allocated from Eskom to Eskom to buy diesel. And he said, quote, "I don't think Eskom has a diesel problem. I think it's got a management problem." Well, that's about right. Although he then followed up by saying that, the real problem here has been that SA hasn't communicated properly that it was tackling the problem of load shedding. Well, usually to make an argument like that, you need to actually, have some evidence by actually tackling the problem. Anyway, Chris, final thoughts from you.
Just to say, I think there is a plan. I think there is the will to implement it. It is to extend opportunities for looting and entrenching power for as long as possible. So we shouldn't, just because they're not delivering on what we think in our view is an actual solution or a plan, I don't think that doesn't mean that they don't have their own plan. They'll do the public rhetoric, they'll do the public signaling of saying that they want to improve service delivery, all this sort of stuff, turn Eskom around, but that doesn't mean that that's what they're motivated by. I think it's partly ideology still. That's definitely the National Democratic Evolution, but also just maybe a lot of them realize they won't be in power forever and they're going to use it for as long as they possibly can. And for those of us with the resources and the capability to do so, stay proofing while you can, because even Eskom's own best estimates have 2027, 2028 for solving load shedding. And I think if you believe that, then we need to make a different plan.
Indeed. All right. Speaking of different plans, let's talk about a legal challenge against Eskom and load shedding. So an interesting collection of groups has come together: the UDM, Build One SA, IFP, the National Union of Metal Workers of SA, NUMSA, a policy analyst, Lakona Mnguni, the owners of several companies, a voluntary active citizenship organization, as well as a Christian Family Foundation have come together to take the government to court over load shedding. In fact, their lawyers, 7 law firms are apparently representing them, have written to Pravin Gordhan and Andre de Ruyter, claiming that the state was in breach of its constitutional obligation to provide electricity. And they have issued a list of demands to government. And so I think we'll start with you, Sara, but let me just go through the list of demands. Tell me how realistic you think all of this is. So they have demanded that there will be no load shedding without procedural fairness and a fair opportunity to make alternative arrangements to affected people and businesses. That load shedding stops with immediate effect, and if not, a full explanation why the government is unable to stop load shedding with immediate effect. In an alternative, they are instructed to demand a specific timetable as to when load shedding will end and the reasons for said timetable. That the state will develop and make publicly available a clear plan to end load shedding, which must include the resources available to ensure that it is realized. That the 18.65% increase granted by NERSA will not be implemented, pending the determination of a court challenge. That the state will, through lawfully created mechanism, make reasonable disclosure to the public on the challenges driving the energy crisis and the solutions implemented to solve it. That the state will commit to compensate everyone who has suffered from quantifiable financial losses because of load shedding. I think that last one might be a bit of a problem. But Sara, what is your thoughts on this new branch of going after Eskom?
Well, I have to say that, when people take a big matter to court of this nature, I expect to know who each and every one of the applicants is. And I expect there's somewhere in there to be the DA, the FF Plus, and even the EFF. In other words, it's that big. Now, the issue is that big, but, you can't draw blood out of a stone. So you can even if they could get a significant number of those demands done, the ANC will argue that it's trying to do that. How do they enforce making a different plan without creating a different plan, which is not in the court's purview? And they can say, no, we are doing a plan. Maybe they'll say we'll have to get rid of some ministers. That would help. But none of it is, it's all sort of, it's so weird. It's just all, other than the financial one that you said is unlikely, that's probably the likeliest, although it's completely unlikely, because it would be so huge. South Africa would crumble under the weight of what people have suffered by the virtue of the loss of electricity. I started reading their letter of demand, and I must say I sort of, I started dozing off and thinking, oh God, I must get on with some work. So I do confess that I don't know all the details of this thing, but it just strikes me that, it's so big and it's so amorphous in the sense that there is pretty much a counter argument to a lot of what they want. It's not going to get them anywhere. This is a political thing. It was a bit like demanding that houses be built, the Grootboom case years ago, that toilets be built at schools. Some toilets are built, some houses are built. That's manageable because that's at least in a narrow sphere. But this, it's political. It's purely political. No, even if you could get orders to rectify some of these things according to the demands, it would be a question of, so what? There's no money, and how can you say that the committee that's meeting and planning isn't trying to do the best possible thing? And we must have a delay while everyone consult. Oh, geez, this country's going to consult itself out of existence.
No, that's that's indeed the case. This seems to me like a failure of people in desperation when protest hasn't been done effectively and when elections aren't producing the results, because this is all the problems listed here are things that the electorate should be demanding from the government when they go to the ballot box. Mm-hmm. And the courts is not the place for this.
Absolutely. Can I just say in response to that? Well, that's one of the problems with having second-generation rights in your constitution, which is very much a Soviet thing. It originated with the Soviets. Your first-generation rights are negative in the sense that you shall not have your freedom of speech inhibited. You shall not be abused by the police. In other words, they're easy rights for the government largely to provide. But as soon as you provide a positive right, such as you shall, that's why you said you shall have access to healthcare, not that you entitled or you shall have healthcare. You access to schooling, or you must go. Those things are in the political domain of, as you say, of the election, of an election. They're not within they're not going to be resolved by legal action.
Exactly. And as you say, the enforcement is really difficult. And we've seen this time and time again since the 90s when we had all these second-generation rights put into our constitution, and civil society groups, NGOs, were very excited about this. Now we're going to finally be able to hold government to account. And the first time they took government to account, the court says, okay, well, I mean, they have to. And the government says, just sort of shrugs.
Yeah.
And then you're stuck. So it's not very effective. Chris, what do you make of this? I mean, do you agree with me and Sara that this is, while I think heart definitely in the right place, is really not that effective?
Look, I think the problems that we face are multifaceted, and maybe the solutions are also multifaceted. It's easy for me to try and give you a 2-page solution with 3 bullet points that if we implement them, everything will be solved. Whereas maybe it's actions like this, it's other forms of court cases, it's simply ignoring the states in some cases, state-proofing yourself as best as you can. It's a whole bunch of stuff that different individuals, groups, community organizations try that will slowly but surely fill that void that is being left by the current government. So it does give me some hope and some heart. Just when you think South Africans are completely out for the count, they try and find some way to do things, and maybe this, for this group of people, is the best way forward. I mean, if one can give any sort of advice or anything like that, it would be to band together with other civil society organizations to at least do a bit more of a broader sort of range of attack kind of thing. But look, anything to me that takes away resources and time from the current government is a worthwhile endeavor in my book.
Well, I think the reality is, if you want to fix load shedding, you as a citizen, firstly you need to make whatever plans you can to solve it in your own life. But beyond that, you need to protest where you can, and you need to vote for the parties that you think will actually end load shedding. And in my opinion, that is not the ANC or the EFF, but that is really the way that this is going to be solved, at least from the government's perspective. From the private perspective, we need to make our own plans, as Herman said very eloquently on the show the other day. Okay, let's move on to something load shedding. Let me tell you, the hardest part about this show in the past a couple of days has been trying to find something vaguely relevant to talk about that wasn't to do with load shedding, because almost everything we've got on the agenda here is to do with load shedding. I think that says quite a lot about the place we're in. But anyway, we've just got news in that 1,400 people, around that, just a little bit over that number, people died during the festive season in South Africa, which is a little bit of a drop from last year. That's a 14% drop on 1,600 people, and 685 people died on the roads in December. So this is good news. South Africa's roads are pretty dangerous, particularly when everyone travels to see their relatives or go to the beach or whatever in December. And I guess the question really is why. Sara, has Minister Mbalula had some success in taming South Africa's dangerous roads?
It'll be a cold, what is a freezing day in hell when I agree that Mbalula has been successful. I think what's been successful.
Come on, Sara, be the bigger man. Come on.
No, I'm not bigger. I'm meaner. And I am a woman. We can get into that debate. The ANC managed, with load shedding, infrastructure, floods, etc., to make sure that feces ended up in the sea. So a lot of people didn't go down to Durban. Also, as I think there was a group that was protesting in the Phoenix area, because of extensive load shedding or just outages as a result of load shedding, saying that, it's hot in Durban at the moment and you can't run a air conditioner. I mean, can you imagine Durban now without access to some sort of air conditioning? I mean, I'm saying in Joburg, I mean, so I just genuinely, and petrol is beyond expensive. The price of everything has gone up. So I think people probably decided to stay home and in the absence of electricity, spend time on their cell phones, communing with their relatives.
Chris, I think, I'm sure you agree that really seems like this is just another sign that the South African economy is struggling a bit at the moment, with all of these pressures being placed upon our heads.
No, absolutely. I mean, you have to compare these sorts of individual data points to previous years and trends to really see if things have improved or not relative to the size of the population. So as the population size has grown, is that number of fatalities on the roads actually lower in terms of proportionality or relativity kind of thing? I do wonder if it, not to give Minister Fix Everything credit or government credit in this regard, but if there's a case to be made for fewer fatalities, does that point to South Africans just trying to rely on their own sort of wits and making sure that when they do travel, they don't, maybe drink as much as they did before, that sort of thing? They try and make sure that they are safe.
I will say that the national highways, at least as far as I've driven on them, and mainly the N1 in the past 24 months, have been pretty decent.
Yeah.
And it is a rare the sphere of government where things sort of seem to be going okay. Now, I can't speak to the quality of the national roads in the rest of the country, but at least the N1 seems in pretty good nick.
Yeah, I spent some time in the Free State and KZN, and I mean, parts are still good and well maintained, but when you reach sort of peripheries of towns, even if you're heading through to somewhere like Durban, even if you're only driving through Harrismith, it's seriously deteriorating. So then again, you've got the problem of does that municipality take charge of that? Does a community group try and solve those problems and fix the roads themselves or not? Where does their money go? Where can't it go? All that sort of stuff. So a complicated issue, but I mean, when trying to make sense of the stuff, I don't think the default should be government put up 5 posters and therefore people are more responsible. I think the side should be more in sort of individual agency and action and trying to at least somewhat make sure that people look after themselves and their families, which doesn't mean it's always going to be perfect. If you have some degree of freedom, you have a degree of risk. But, you can't outlaw risk completely. And, I think we should be very scared if the government ever does try to make road accidents illegal, because who knows what ways they're going to try and prevent that sort of thing by infringing on people's liberty.
It's always something to keep in mind. All right, we're pretty close to time now, so I think let's call it there. I just want to say thank you everyone for watching. If you enjoy this show, please share it around, like it, proselytize it on the street corner or wherever it may be appropriate to proselytize for the Daily Friend Show. We will continue to bring you news and analysis and hopefully some chuckles going forward into 2023. And we will see you tomorrow on the Daily Friend Show. I hope you all have a wonderful day and are able to keep cool and hydrated in this hot weather. Cheers, everyone.